Are you aware that 12 months from now, there's going to be an extraordinary event take place here on earth? It is going to be unlike anything that's ever happened before. It is actually a harvest of saved souls. The occasion is Shabuah. It is the day that Christians ripped off in spectacular fashion, if you like a train wreck, to call Pentecost. The actual name of the day is Shabuah. It's not the birth of a church. God doesn't have a church. It is in recognition of a wheat's harvest, a harvest of standing grain. It represents the 2 loaves of bread that are Yehudim and Goyim. And it is of the covenant family. It is also a Bakurim harvest, which means that the beneficiaries will all have availed themselves of what to do to David as the Messiah, Son of God, our King and Savior, accomplished in 33 CE when he was crucified by the Romans in fulfilling Passover. And those individuals who are part of the covenant family, who have accepted the 5 terms and conditions of the Bereth, who have availed themselves of the benefits of the 7 Moed Mekre, and particularly with Dod's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, the first 3. God's going to remove them from the planet at the commencement of the time of Israel's troubles. It is going to be a spectacular event. Now, what's interesting is that among the world's 8 billion people, there will be fewer than 1 in a million who leave. Personally, I'd be delighted if there were 8,000 among 8 billion, which would be the 1 in a million. But the number is really up to us. Every individual has the opportunity to listen and to make that decision. Now, it is the decision that to participate in this Shabuah harvest, you will have to have forsaken religion. You will have to have disavowed any religious prejudices. You cannot be a Christian and attend this harvest. You can't be a Christian and enter heaven. You can't be a practitioner of any form of Judaism. Reformed, ultra-Orthodox, just plain old Orthodox, Haredi, you name it. There'll be no practitioners of Judaism in heaven. Most certainly you can't be a Muslim. We have a special heaven for a Muslim. It's better known as hell. So to do this, you will have to have walked away from any religious sentiments. You'll have to have disavowed your politics. God does not want the political in heaven. They've made way too big a mess of things here on earth. So if you're a MAGA, you're not welcome. If you are a Marxist, you're especially not welcome. No matter your political preference, if it is an overt preference in your life, then you're not going to qualify. But it's more than just what you aren't that will open the door for you to participate in the Shabuah harvest. It's also what you become. And what you must become is covenant. And to become covenant, there are 5 conditions. And there are 5 benefits. Those 5 conditions are to walk away from religion and politics, walk away from Babel, confusion, the Bible. You must also walk to God and become perfect. The only way to do that is through the Moed Mekre, the 7 invitations to meet with God each year and to understand what they represent and how to capitalize upon them, who even fulfilled them, why and when, where and for whom. You must also come to trust and rely upon Yahowah, which means that you must know him, not only by name, but you must have taken the time to understand what he is offering and what he expects in return. To be covenant, you must have closely examined and carefully considered the terms and conditions of this family relationship and have acted upon them. And of course, to be covenant of a man, you must be circumcised. It is the sign of the covenant. And as parents, we are requested to circumcise our sons on the 8th day so that we and they might remember the importance of being set apart unto God's family. And you must understand that it is the doorway to life that Dowd opened by allowing his corporeal body to be crucified on Passover in 33 CE, opening this doorway to life and to God's home. He holds the keys to heaven. That following day on Matzah, he carried the guilt of every covenant member with him into Sheol, which is essentially a black hole, depositing it there, never to be seen again, causing every covenant member to appear perfect in God's eyes. And then on Bekurim, the Bekor, the firstborn son of Yahowah, opened the option for us to be adopted into God's family, to be enriched and empowered, enlightened and emancipated, enabled by our God. The individuals who have capitalized upon these things are those who will participate in this harvest, their souls leaving this planet, enveloped in the Spirit, transformed into light energy, immortal, perfect, empowered, enabled, enriched. This is the opportunity that we are considering as we pursue this series called Qatsyr, Harvest, recognizing that Shabu is the next to them. A Shabat, when God does his best work. 22nd of May of 2026. And that's the good news. The bad news is this is the first day of the time of Israel's troubles, that it's going to get exceedingly rough and raw for Israel. And that the 7 years between the May 22nd of 2026 celebration of Shabuah and the celebration of Towrah, the Day of the Herald, on September 23rd and 24th of 2033 is going to be the worst time ever on earth, not just for Jews, for everyone. The world will be engaged in world war. There will be all manner of calamities on earth. Millions of Jews will die and billions of others. It is a horrific time. So it is best to take the ride of a lifetime. Join us on Shabuah. And if you miss it, then if you're Jewish, capitalize on the Towrah harvest. If you miss that, then at least be open to being part of the remnant of God's people that benefit from the sacrifice of the Adam Parah, the red heifer, on the Shabbat of 24 September 2033. The text reads, the word, the oral and written communication of Yahowah. I keep on saying this, but it bears repeating. It does not say Hashem. It does not say the Eternal One. It does not say Adonai. It does not say the Lord. It does not say blessed be he. It most certainly does not say Jesus or Christ or Allah or any of that rubbish. That is all religious rubbish that does nothing but antagonize God. If you sense the frustration and disappointment, utter disgust in my voice for the religious propensity for G-D and Hashem and blessed be he and Adonai and the Lord and Jesus Christ and all of that kind of absolute rubbish, religious rubbish. You ain't saying nothing yet. Wait till you get a load of what God has to say about the religious erasing his name. It says the word of Yahweh. Well, you wouldn't even recognize it if you don't recognize Yahweh's name, would you? It's not for you if you don't accept Yahweh's name, is it? And what right do people have to erase God's name from his own testimony? But that is exactly what the rabbis have done. Did you ask them why they did that? The word of Yahweh, it's a transliteration of Yod He Wah He, our Elohah, God, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his Haya existence, which to show the way to the path that reveals the benefits of the relationship, Asher, literally came to exist for Yoel. Yoel. What do you think the name Yoel means? Are you aware? I know that it's changed in your Bibles, which is a transliteration of Babel, which means to confuse and confound. Probably not a good title for a book, is it? To confuse and confound by intermixing truth and lies. Yoel. Well, it tells you, if nothing else, how to pronounce the Wah in Yahweh's name. Because it is Yod, Wah, Aleph, Lamed. Aleph Lamed is El, it's God's title. It means God, and God didn't write it Aleph dash Lamed. No. So why would you write it that way? Do you see a dash between the E and the L, the Aleph and the Lamed, and anywhere? So if God didn't write the word for God in a way that disguises the word for God, why should you? Stump the stars on that one, huh? Yoel is from Yahweh. Yahweh is there's three forms of Yahweh's name. Yah, Yaho, and Yahowah. From Yahu, we get the pronunciation of the Hebrew Wah, just like we get it from Torah, just like we get it from Shalom. It's the Wah that conveys the pronunciation of the O vowel. So it's Yah, Owah. In this case, it's Yoel. It means Yahweh is God. Significant? Do you care? Or are you going to continue to blabber on and embarrass yourself and irritate God with a G-D and a Hashem? Yoel. Yahweh is God. Son of Pethuel. Open to God. Well, that would mean he couldn't have been Jewish. Yoel, meaning Yahweh is God, was one of Yahweh's final three prophets. We really don't know if he wrote after Zechariah and before Malachi or before Zechariah, but right in this time, somewhere between 550 and 450 BCE. So he's pretty significant in the sense that these last three guys were the last to communicate from Yahweh for the last 2,500 years. So, yeah, when a guy says, my name is Yahweh is God, I'm the son of one who is open to God, and the word of Yahowah came to exist with me at this particular time, you'd think everybody would pay attention. I did. What about you? So Yoel, meaning Yahweh's God, was one of Yahweh's final 3 prophets, joining, as I've said, Zechariah and Malachi, circa 500 BCE, plus or minus 50 years of that time. He had a great deal to say about Israel's return now as we approach the last 8 years. In addressing those who were open to God, he encouraged them to choose of your own volition to listen to this, leaders of the community, especially those who are prominent and mature. Hear this and respond of your own accord. Everyone living in and inhabiting the land. Has such as this happened in your days, or even in the time of your fathers? This is Yoel 1:2. It is interesting that we're moving into Yoel at this time because the Roman Catholic Church and Christianity at all, the Christian New Testament, used Yoel, which they will call Joel, to justify their thievery of Shabuah, making it the celebration of Pentecost, which was the birth of their church. And yet, Yoel ain't talking about no church, no mention of a church, or no mention of a Jebus, no mention of a Mr. Christ, no mention of a birth. Nope. He had nothing to say about any of those things. He's talking to people today, not 2,000 years ago. And it's obvious when Peter is citing Yoel to justify the blabbering that he claims took place on Pentecost, where everybody would blabber in any language and everybody would understand the blabber. And it was just a really great time of blabbering. But one of the, of course, the big issues would be then why did Peter and Paul and all of that gang then have translators? That's how Peter and Mark hooked up. There's a translator. Paul and Luke. They were all translators. This great miracle of Pentecost happened. Why did they need those? Think it through, folks. Anyway, the fact of the matter is what we're going to find out is that Yoel is speaking of an event unlike any other event in human history. I've always referred to it as the greatest show on earth. What is going to transpire in this period between the fulfillment of Towrah and the evening of Towrah to the morning of Towrah to this great homecoming on Kippurim to the 8-day celebration of Sukkah and everything that's going to transpire there. It is going to be the greatest show in the history of this planet. And so that's how Yoel is announcing it. Now, of course, nothing happened like that in Jerusalem, Roman occupied Jerusalem. In Judea at that time, there isn't a single eyewitness testimony of anything occurring there. In fact, what's interesting, Christians think, oh my God, we got so many eyewitnesses. It's a historical figure. Jesus is real. No. The oldest extant fragment that can be found pursuant to this person whose name isn't even mentioned, it's a placeholder, dates to the 2nd century, fully a century after these events took place. The first 14 books of the Christian New Testament were written between 52 and 66 CE, between 30 and 20 and 30 years after these events played out. by a person who claimed to be demon-possessed and who was not an eyewitness, saw none of it take place. And he doesn't even bother to quote this mythical gospel Jesus. It would be Paul's letters. Mark wrote under Paul's insistence, 75 CE, clearly was not an eyewitness. And now we are, 40 years after these events took place? 40, 45 years? That's really 2 generations, longer than most people lived in those days. And that's when it may have first emerged as a written document, and yet there's no trace of it until 100 years thereafter. And that's only a fragment, tiny little fragment. Luke is basically Mark with some paganism thrown in to stir the pot and make it appear more religious. And Luke wasn't an eyewitness either. He wrote about the same time. He was Paul's propagandist, his promoter, his healer. Book of Acts was also a personal letter that was written by Luke, and he told Paul's story, not the mythical Jesus' story. Matthew, the first book that's printed in the Christian New Testament, it wasn't written until 95 CE, and by an impostor, of course. And 80% of it is plagiarized from Mark and Luke, and what didn't come from Mark and Luke, that remaining 20% was stolen from the Ebonites. I have no idea who wrote John, although it was written just shy of 100 CE. The only thing that attribute it to John at all is some lies that were curated by Eusebius, who's the most devious player in this whole story. No. There's nothing that even comes close to being an eyewitness account of a Jesus because, well, he never existed. And there's nothing that is contemporaneous with the events. Nothing. Oh, but what about Josephus, man? He said there was a Jesus that was known as the Christ. No, he didn't. Fact is, no, he didn't. We don't have a copy of Josephus's text in the in the Greek, which is where he wrote it, that would have had those names, which are Greek names and a Greek title, written in them prior to the 10th century. Josephus hadn't even been born by the time that the Jesus character was dead. Hadn't been born. The only line that is there, the earliest reference to it, is in like a 7th century document that was a translation into Latin. And the only place where it's even mentioned, even in the 4th century, is by the aforementioned Eusebius, who had copies of his documents and most certainly added it. And of course, Josephus was a scoundrel. He was a traitor. His most important story, which is that of Masada, was completely fabricated. We know that everything he said about Masada, which was the highlight of his history of the Jews, was a complete lie. That's the best you got. You got nothing. And that's the best you got. And you got nothing. So no Pentecost. It is Shabuah. And Yoel is talking about the last days. Time that we're living in now, particularly what happens between Teruah and Sukkah in year 6000 Yah, 2033. So choose on your own volition to listen to this. Leaders of the community, especially those who are prominent and mature, hear this and respond of your own accord. Everyone living in and inhabiting the land. Has such as this happened in your days, or even in the time of your fathers? He's saying that the miracles that God performed to release the children of Israel from Mitzrayim, Egypt, pale in comparison to what is going to occur. Pale. There's nothing in all of the human experience that is going to be as spectacular as what's going to occur between Towrah and Sukkah. Now you say, oh boy, I can't wait to get there. Then I'll make my decision as what I'm going to do about what you're saying. No, you won't. If you're a goy, you got 12 months. After the 12 months, done. The next harvest is of olives. It's not a wheat harvest. There's not 2 loaves. I don't see any avenue for you if you're goyim. You don't make the next harvest, and that is asking a lot of you. You've got to do a ton of reading and thinking and analyzing and coming to understand and processing and then responding. And it's going to take every bit of the time you have left. And after that time, you got nothing. And if you're a Yehud, well, you still can make this same decision to be part of the Shavuot harvest, and I really hope you do. But if you miss it, 7 years later, you will have the opportunity for a gleaning on Towrah. But to make it, you will have to have survived the time of Yaakov's troubles, be the most devastating period in human history. And then for the final remnant, for those who missed that harvest, the next day will be the sacrifice of the Adam of Torah, and Jews once again will have the opportunity not to become immortal, but to enter the millennial Shabat as a mortal remnant, prepared to meet God as a result of the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adam of Torah. Myself, so boy, that's going to be a lot for you to accept. If you're not willing to accept what I'm telling you now, as Solomon told you to do, he said specifically, you need to listen to what I say and do as I ask if you want to have any hope of salvation. And so how are you going to do that on the last possible opportunity on Towrah if you're not willing to listen to me now? But anyway, those are the 3 opportunities, 1 more for Goyim, 3 more for Jews. And so what we have here is Yoel saying, it's time to pay attention. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Now, there are a number of initial insights that are worth noting because the prophet gets right down to business. This is your no-nonsense prophet. Yoel is the streamlined guy, man. He says, I got a big story to tell. I'm going to get right to the story, and you better pay attention because we're moving along. He gets right down to business. I like this man. To begin, Yoel is asking us to listen to what God has to say. Particularly, not just God, what Yahweh has to say. He just happens to be the only God, but it's important to know his name. Yoel used it, particularly at this time. He is directing our attention to Ha-Zaken, the prominent and mature among us. This is because, as we will learn when we reach Yoel 2:19 in this review, the grain represented by the Chita'am, the wheats, gathered during the fulfillment of Shavuot are prominent and mature. They're individuals, at least from Yahweh's perspective, prominent and mature grain. So that's a important hint for you. But I think there's a bigger hint here. And that is because Yahweh asked me to transition from translator to warrior on and wordsmith on X and Facebook and social media, and to do this YAHOWAH blog. And in doing that, I see the world as it is, and it's horrible. And one of the things I'm witnessing is that if you're not covenant, if you don't have a covenant parent that has guided you to the covenant, and you're not among the young men and women who are part of the covenant family, you are in a world of trouble. It's astonishing to see how utterly foolish, how incredibly ignorant, immoral, and irrational today's youth is. I mean, screaming for free Palestine, as if there was such a thing as Palestine, as there was such a thing as freedom in Islam, as if the Muslims deserved Israel, as if the Jews are wrong to protect themselves, has to be the lamest, most grotesquely immoral plea, most ignorant plea ever issued, and it's pervasive. Most of those under 30 want the fake Palestinians to have Israel. You're just revolting. You're too stupid for words. I am here to tell you, do not read my books. Do not listen to anything I have to say. Go away. I do not want to spend eternity with somebody as stupid as you are. So please, under 30, unless you are well on your way to say, I am disgusted by my own generation, I want no part of you. And I am the gatekeeper for Shabuah and Towrah. So I have a lot of say in this regard. And I'm telling you, go away. I want nothing to do with you. God wants nothing to do with you. You're revolting, just flat out stupid. So hopefully there's some wisdom in I've got a few of them here. There we go. Gray hairs. And that's what God is trying to get to wake up. Some of the more mature among us. Some who have some experience and know that now returning to Marxism, that's a really dumb idea. Bigger government, far worse than smaller government. Partnering with genocidal Muslims, that death cult, really brain dead. So we know that the Shabuah harvest is of mature individuals. Now, that doesn't mean mature in age. It means mature in attitude. That is to say, members of the covenant who have grown in their knowledge of God, who stand up and stand out by having studied Yada Yahowah, they're able to encourage others to join us during Shabuah. And there are multiple times in the Torah and prophets where Yahweh endorses Yada Yahowah by name. That is the name of these books. I wrote these books under that name long before I knew that was going to be Yahweh's endorsement, but he is endorsing what I have written as Yada Yahowah for you to read and respond to. Again, with the caveat, if you're part of that Marxist, loving Muslim, embracing genocidal, anti-Jewish movement, stay away. Now, Yoel is quick to point out that listening and learning matter. When we respond appropriately, in keeping with the theme of the Shabuah harvest, his message is for Kol Yasab Ha-Eretz, everyone inhabiting the land and the earth today, to pay very close attention. When Yoel issues his prophetic warning, revealing what we're about to endure, he says it's never occurred previously. Just as the onslaught of COVID-19 changed the world in 2020, mainly because those who like to control others, stealing their liberty and livelihoods, grossly overreacted. The Islamic assault on Israel in 2023 profoundly changed the world. Not just changed Israel, it changed how everyone in the world responded to Israel. It was a cathartic moment like we have never seen before. And as a litmus test of stupid and immoral, it looks like 80% of the world failed that test. It led to a anti-Semitic shyster show on a planetary scale. And the epicenter of that seismic shift really is the United Nations. They have now issued more resolutions against Israel than all other nations combined twice over. Israel has got the most moral military in the world. It's the only democracy in the midst of that sea of ignorance. It is the victim, not the perpetrator. UN has just become grossly immoral. It is as if the world body that came to exist due to the failures of the Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations, which was stunningly anti-Semitic, and during the Holocaust is now hell-bent on inspiring the next Holocaust. And in fact, it does. That's why I called the series that I'm delivering in the Rainbow Room the gateway to the Holocaust and the gateway out of the Holocaust because of what's going to happen through the UN and particularly with American betrayal. So suffice it to say, we are entering uncharted waters in hurricane conditions. Now, this forecast for a exceedingly turbulent future is underscored by the rhetorical question, has such as this happened in your days or even in the time of your fathers? Now, this is significant because no ethnicity in human history has ever been treated worse than Jews. Well, this is the last hurrah, the song of the final herald, reminding God's people that they are running out of opportunities. This was conveyed 2,600 years ago. That is why it would have been a good idea for parents to inform their children regarding its approach, recount it accurately. Shafar. Proclaim this written communication to inform, choosing to recount it to your children. And then let your children tell their children, and then their children to the last generation, so that they do not hesitate and get left behind. Ladora Akar, so that those of this age do not linger, procrastinate, or equivocate, holding back or delaying, and therefore get left. Yahowah is God. Joel 1:3. Well, let's just cut to the chase. This is absolute proof that Peter in Luke's Acts 2 lied when he cited Yoel to validate his birth of the church and the arrival of the Holy Spirit so that everybody could babble in all different languages in 33 CE. I'm pretty sure that I understand the Hebrew word akar, and it means the last. In fact, Dor Akar would be the last generation, not just the last days. Dor Akar is the last generation. I missed it by a smidgen, just a couple of 1,000 years. That's about how far that Paul missed his rapture, too. He said he was going to be part of it. He even picked the wrong day. He picked trumpets. Regarding its approach, recount it accurately. That's exactly the opposite of what the Christian New Testament does. They recounted it inaccurately. That's why I wrote Twistianity. What I did is I compared what the Twistian New Testament said and what God said, and they are irreconcilable. There isn't a single quote in the Christian New Testament that accurately renders what God said or that draws the same conclusion from a statement that God laid out in the text. Not one. There are many, many, many that get it wrong, including the second chapter of Acts, which cites 4 different places in the Torah and prophets and the Psalms, and they got them all wrong. Not just a little wrong. They rendered the opposite of what was actually conveyed. So regarding its approach, recount it accurately. That's something God is very insistent upon. Proclaim this written communication in writing to affirm. The statements that I'm sharing with you now are in volume 5 of Yada Yahowah. It's an 825-page volume devoted to Shabuah and Towrah. 825 pages. I don't even cover it all. And I've 825 pages of translations and insights pursuant to just those 2 days, Shabuah and Towrah. So I've done my part. I've recounted it accurately. Now it's your job to do your part, to process it based upon that accurate communication. So regarding this approach, recount it accurately to your children, and then let your children tell their children, and then their children, to the Dor Akar, the last generation. Right now, the last generation. You're at 8 years. That's it. Time of Jacob's trouble starts 1 year from now. 7-year period of the time of Jacob's troubles ends on Towrah in 2033. Yeah, because Dode came and was crucified as the Passover lamb in 33. It's 40 Yobel. Separate these times. Abraham and Yishak had the dress rehearsal for what Dode would accomplish on Mount Moriah, exactly 40 Yobel. Prior to that, 1968 BCE. Adam and Chava were booted out of the garden, exactly 48 Yobel prior to that time, in 3968 BCE. Catch the pattern? 40 Yobel, 2,000 years, separate each of these seminal events. The prophet, whose name was clearly attested and means Yahweh is God, was warning his people, who were his people, Yisrael, Yehudim, that those living in Yisrael, exactly what was about to occur and how it would affect the last generation of Israelites in the land of Israel. Yoel was providing information from Yahweh, which, when heard and understood, would enable an intelligent response. Now, according to Yoel, nothing had ever occurred that could be compared to what's going to come. Now, it sounds as if he is addressing what occurred on 10/7/23 and how the world so quickly turned against the victims of the savage Islamic assault. And it was the brutality of what Muslims did. I mean, literally. In one case, a Muslim cut the belly open of a pregnant Jewish woman, removed the fetus, tortured the fetus while the woman was still alive, and then mutilated the woman. I mean, you just can't get more sadistic than that. And Allah, who is Satan, isn't even that sadistic, I don't think. And yet, with Muslims doing this to Jews, most of the world has turned against the victims. I mean, it's the most idiotic, nonsensical, grotesquely immoral, totally irrational, completely ignorant mass hallucination in human history. That sadistic Islamic assault was unlike anything the world had ever seen. And yet it was just a harbinger of what was going to come. There will be an Oscar flood 2.0. And it's going to be 1,000 times worse. It hurts me. God, it hurts me to say that. And the reason it's so painful for me to say that is that I invested the time, took the thousands of death threats, exposed myself personally on thousands upon thousands of talk radio interviews to write Prophet of Doom and then update it to the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion to protect Israel from Islam. And it, like getting Jews to read it so that they can survive is like pulling teeth. And rather complain about Pakistanians or complain about Arabs or complain about Hamas or complain about Iran without ever taking the time to understand that for 1,400 years, this devilish religion of Islam has had their number. It has perpetrated apartheid and genocide on Jews for 14 centuries, beginning with Muhammad. It is emblazoned in the Quran, and you can't get them to accept that reality. And so when I have done all that I can do to try to protect God's people, and they won't lift a finger to help themselves, Saddens me. And all the while, the brightest people on earth have been played as utter fools by the dumbest people on earth, playing right into their hands by bombing Gaza into oblivion. Listen, I don't give a crap about Gaza. The Muslims in Gaza are all complicit. What I care about is what is happening to Israel as a result of the images of Gaza getting bombed, because it is suicidal for Israel. Well, and so it is that what Muslims have done to Jews from the beginning is going to continue, and the crescendo is going to begin in 2027. That'll be 1 year after Israel is handed up its heart given to Saudi Arabia as part of the two-state solution to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia and to placate the European nations and to honor the bribe that these countries gave to Donald Trump when Israel is totally vulnerable and the jihadists armed to the teeth don't just come through a chain link fence. They come from inside the heart of Israel. And not just a few thousand of them. No, this time it'll be a few million. So what we saw on 2027 that was so hellacious, that Yoel wants everyone to capitalize upon the Shabuah Qatsyr so they won't have to endure what comes next and what is so much worse. Those left behind are going to experience something far more grievous than the Holocaust. And so it bears repeating to the last generation so that they do not get left behind. You see, if you don't make the Towrah harvest and you're a goy, you are being left behind. That's just it. There is no more opportunity for you. If you are, you can be part of the worker crew and Shabuah, but that's not what Yoel is interested in at this point. If you're a Jew, you have Teruah and that ingathering. And if you're left behind in that ingathering, the only shot for you is to be part of the mortal remnant the next day that is benefited by the sacrifice of the red heifer. And it is when the concept of being left behind is presented by Yeshaya, Isaiah, in the 17th chapter, in association with the fulfillment of Teruah. And so it bears repeating to that last generation, tell them these things so they don't get left behind. There are not many tomorrows left to get this right. Now, the ruse of intoxication was interjected into Peter's Pentecost pronouncement to make the event appear prophetic. But in this case, it had the opposite effect. Awaken and choose to take action. You who are intoxicated, weep and wail, all who drink in association with new and sweet wine. For indeed, it is cut off and severed from your mouth, and thus your speech, because a non-Yisraelite nation will come up against my land, the potent force of a great multitude, so numerous as to be uncountable. It has sharpened teeth, the piercing incisors of a destructive beast, and it has the fangs of a violent animal with a loud roar. Yoel, Yahweh is God. Joel 1:5 and 1:6. Now, my job here is to do more than give you an accurate and complete rendering of the text that Yahweh conveyed through his prophets, which I do, the most complete and accurate, verifiable translation ever offered. My job is more than just to find what things need to be said and how we go from one text to another to pull this picture together and tell the whole story, because the story is told in Yirmiyah, Yeshaya, Hosea, Zechariah, Malachi, and um, in all of these books, Yoel. It's the same story. They're all telling a story from different vantage points. And so you need to know how to put them all together to make certain that you understand all of the elements that are going on around you. But that's not even my most important job. As it relates to these translations and conveying what God inspired through his prophets, my biggest job is to explain them. You might say, well, why do I need to explain them? I was only be able to just give me the translation. I just want a more accurate translation. Thank you very much. Just give me no, not even thank you. Just give me a more accurate translation. I'll take it from there. Why? These words have been available for 2,500 years. Did anyone understand them? Nope. Did anybody bother to create an amplified rendering of them from the oldest extant sources like the Dead Sea Scrolls? Nope. Did anyone understand what God was talking about? Nope, because what happened with Christianity? They usurped this particular text to claim that it took place 2,000 years ago, and it verified their Pentecost. And yet there wasn't a single rabbi, not a single Jew, who said, are you out of your mind? It doesn't speak of something that happened 2,000 years ago. It speaks of something that's going to happen in our future. What part of last generation don't you get? And in this case, Paul said that used this because, or not Paul, but Peter, because he alleges that the Jews that were watching imaginary Pentecost said they must be intoxicated. And this is saying not that this newly hatched church is intoxicated. It says the people of Israel are intoxicated. You are in a stupor. You're inebriated. Your thinking is slowed. You're like the drunk trying to walk down the straight line, and you're just wobbling and weaving all over the place. You're asked to answer a question, and you're intoxicated. You're in a stupor. And I said, so you start. If you're one of those, it's time to weep and wail. For indeed, it's cut off and separate from your mouth, and thus your speech. You haven't figured it out. It's been there for you to read all the time, but you haven't figured it out. So my job is to help you figure it out. My job is to explain what they said so that you can understand it. You don't need that service? No problem. Go away. See if you can figure it out. Be the first to do well, you can't be the first to do repeat what I've done. See how you can do it on your own. People have tried. Not successfully, however. For indeed, it is cut off and severed from your mouth and thus your speech, because a non-Israelite nation is going to shove it down your throat, going to come up against my land, a potent force of a great multitude. You know, when I said that October 7th, which I predicted the nature of that assault a year in advance, talked about how the aerial bombardments would come and they would be a bit overwhelming for the Iron Dome, and they would distract Israel while Muslims just cut through the fences and stormed into local small communities, raping, killing people, abducting them, and raising havoc with the IDF unable to respond because it doesn't know how to fight that kind of foe. It's all geared up to fight foes that are going to come in jet airplanes or fire sophisticated missiles or drive tanks. They don't know how to deal with this, and they didn't. They wasted an entire day. They were just brain dead, paralyzed. They didn't say anything. They didn't give any orders. They didn't respond. The politicians didn't respond. Nobody. The Shin Bet didn't respond. The Mossad didn't respond. Your media didn't respond. The politicians didn't respond. The IDF didn't respond. Everybody didn't respond. And that was 1,000 times less than what's going to happen going forward. They had no problem counting how many jihadists came through that fence. About 4,000. About 2/3 of them were not Hamas. They were just ordinary Muslims, most of them on foot, most of them even without weapons. Turns out you don't need a weapon to rape. Turns out you don't even need a weapon to abduct. Turns out you don't need a weapon to be a terrorist. Yeah, some of them came into farming communities and used hoes and picks and axes, shovels to do their bidding. Ordinary knives. Anyway, it says this force is going to be a great multitude. Atzum, a mighty and powerful, exceptionally large and vicious, numerous, so numerous as to be uncountable, beyond inventory, innumerable. Yeah, it's not going to be 4,000 next time. It'll be closer to 4 million. And I've gone through the math to explain how you get to that number. And worse, you're going to have close to 1 million, at least 500,000, are going to come from right inside of Israel, from the heart of Israel, because Israel's going to be forced to give up its heart for a terror state. And now that Syria is run by an Islamic terrorist who's already sending rockets now into Israel, now that he has U.S. cover, now that Donald Trump thinks he's a handsome fellow, a real fighter. Yeah, Jolani, the former head of the Islamic State, former Al-Qaeda. So I think that's going to work out for you, Israel. It says it has sharpened teeth. Boy, do they ever. Allahu Akbar, I kill you. Piercing incisors of a destructive beast. The Muslims of October 7th weren't animals. That would be unfair to animals. Animals don't behave that bad. They were monstrous. They were savages. They were beasts. They were devilish demons. Way below the status of human, way below the status of animal. There's no animal on the earth that acts that bad. This was a special form of demon. You're one of those Marxists out there promoting for free Palestine so that these demons can continue to abuse. You're out of your ever-loving mind. They were violent with a loud roar. Allahu Akbar. You think Allahu Akbar means we're there for Hamas? You think Allahu Akbar means I'm Islamic Jihad? You think Allahu Akbar means we really appreciate the funding we got from Qatar and the weapons that we got from Iran? Is that what Allahu Akbar means? Does Allahu Akbar mean I'm a Boy Scout? Does Allahu Akbar means that I'm a liberation army? Does Allahu Akbar mean that I'm fighting for the liberty of my people? Does Allahu Akbar mean I'm a Palestinian? Does Allahu Akbar mean I came from Gaza? Does Allahu Akbar mean I'm a member of the PLO and I'm choosing to be here for the PA? Or is Allahu Akbar simply a confession? I'm a Muslim. My God is the demon monster Allah, and I'm following his Quran and the terrorist Muhammad's example. Is that what Allahu Akbar means? Because I'd be pleased to hear if there's another explanation. I know when Allahu Akbar was first issued. Muhammad's terrorist raid on Kabar. They were the last Jewish community left in Arabia that he had not already killed all of the men, raped all the women, and sold the children into slavery. They were it. And he came upon Kabar, and his men screamed for the first time, Allahu Akbar, because you know what Allahu Akbar means? Allah is greater than Yahowah. Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, Allah is Satan. Yahweh's God. Now, while horrific and inexcusable, the Islamic savagery that was on display before and after October 7th, still on display with the way that Muslims are torturing their Jewish kidnap victims. It has been uncommon in the annals of history to see that kind of savagery. Now, that's not to say they were the first to abuse Jews, because the Egyptians abused them, the Philistines, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Roman Catholics, the first Muslims, the Ottomans, the Europeans, the Nazis, present-day Muslims, and, of course, today's Marxists have all been inhumanly brutal to Jews. It's just that this was a special kind of demon-possessed savagery. Therefore, the great multitude lashing out and piercing Israel represents an attack of vastly more debilitating and horrifying militants, mujahideen, jihadists, at least 100 times, and I think 1,000 times the number of belligerents. You know, you can count 6,000. Let's just take 5. You can count 5,000. IDF did. You can count 50,000. You can count 150,000. There were 185,000 Assyrians trying to destroy Jerusalem back in the time of Hezekiah. Now, they didn't get to fire a shot because Hezekiah destroyed all traces of religion in Israel. That means that today he would have obliterated the Haredim, gotten rid of every yeshiva and every synagogue, and every flag with Bar Kokhba's star on it. He'd have gotten rid of every 9-candle menorah, gotten rid of all of it. Every yarmulke, kippah, if you prefer. He would have gotten rid of all of that, and they would have been observing Chag Matzah, which Jews don't even understand, so you'd have to have a whole new cast of characters because they think that Passover is a 7-day celebration and completely ignore Pesach and Matzah and Bakorim when it is a 7-day celebration of Matzah. Pesach is just the first day. So I think that you could count 150,000. God had no problem providing that number. Hezekiah knew the number. But when you get to be 1.5 million, that's a big number. 5 million, that's tough to count. And that's what I think we're dealing with here. I think it'll be 5 million jihadists on the last and great jihad. And I think that those 5 million jihadists are going to kill around the world, because they won't all be in Israel, just most of them. I think they're going to kill 10 million Jews, 2 out of every 3. It's an attack vastly more debilitating and horrifying. I think it's 1,000 times more armed jihadists and mujahideen, and perhaps upwards of 100 times the aerial bombardments. And it's going to overwhelm the Iron Dome. And what's going to happen is in the cities like Tel Aviv, there'll be so many fires and so much destruction that they'll be in flames and no one to put out the fires, no electricity left, no water, nothing. And they will burn while all of the smaller communities of Israel will be overrun by jihadists. Be desperate. And these animals biting Jews will be screaming, Allahu Akbar. They will be Muslims. Now, Yahweh equates geffen, vines, with the best of Israel, growing out of the garden he and his son, Dod, planted along the slopes of Zion. Similarly, the ta'nefa, fig, is symbolic of Israel's health and ability to produce good fruit. Both are in for a beating. Muslims are Muslims, after all. It says, my vines will be set up for appalling desolation. La Shama, or atrocious devastating, being laid waste for something especially atrocious and ugly. And my fig tree, it will be a splintered stump, snapped off and cut down, toppled and yet still rooted in the ground, stripped bare, exposed, left as condemned, once vulnerable and denounced. It will be torn apart, rejected and hurled away, thrown down and cast aside. Its branches, intertwined shoots will be bleached and whitewashed. Yahowah, Yahowah is God, Joel 1:7. You want to know why God can't intervene at this point? Because there's no one to intervene with. God can't interact with those who reject him. He can't come to those who don't know his name, don't call him. He will return on Israel's defense, but only for those who return to him. And as this progresses, there still aren't enough of the victims who are going to stop placing their trust in the rabbis or in their political party or in the IDF or in the Shin Bet or any host of Jewish customs. And so they're going to be torn to ribbons. And it's sad, but it's only because as they're being torn to ribbons, there'll literally be nothing left. No one to protect them, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. Jihadists screaming, Allahu Akbar everywhere. They're all rapists. They're torturous. They're terrorists. The screams will be everywhere. And even then, most won't turn to Yahowah. It's going to have to get really dark to break through the facade of Israeli stubbornness. Now, it's interesting. As this is happening, I'm going to be there. So will Elia. If you're looking for us, we'll be on the Temple Mount. As this is transpiring, we'll be speaking against those who are striking at Israel. More importantly, we will be calling every Israelite who's willing to listen home. And those who accept the terms and conditions of the covenant at this time, who embrace what Dod has done to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, they're going to be invited into the replica of the tent of the Restoring Witness, which will be set up after the Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mosque are blown away on top of the Temple Mount. Our home will be your home. But for the rest, my vines will be set up for appalling desolation, and my fig tree will be splintered, the stump snapped off, cut down, stripped bare, exposed, rejected and hurled away, its branches bleached. Now, just because it's my job to point out how Christianity is a pile of rubbish, and I wouldn't do so if it weren't for the fact that that rubbish is piled on top of the most profound of all truths, that it was Dod who was crucified on Passover in 33 CE, and he is the Messiah and the Son of God. And the myth of Jesus was conceived to counterfeit him through identity theft. But there was no invasion associated with Pentecost. It is a wheat harvest that we should expect in the decades. The wheat harvest is the last harvest to start this time of Jacob's troubles, when these wars will begin, and it'll be the true gleaning of olives that ends it. Once the heartland of Israel is sacrificed for the two-state dissolution based upon America's betrayal, which is going to occur over the next year, there will be war. And Israel would be destroyed in that war if it were not precluded by Yahweh's return with Dod, the ultimate warrior, and the Messiah to save his people. And so while Israel is celebrating the demise of Nasrallah on this day, we will finally have the planet rid of this viper, and the celebration of all that is horrible about Islam will soon take place, but they're going to wreak havoc before that occurs. There are 2 billion more of them that will attack, that will either attack personally or will support the attack of Jews. And it will be finally Dod who stops every one of them and foils Allah's party. The belligerents assaulting Israel, which Yahweh refers to as my land, will be so numerous that they will be uncountable. 2 million of the 2 billion Muslims, the very least, are going to flood into Israel. I think the number will be closer to 4 million. But I think you can count on there being 2 million. The IDF is not geared for that. That's not their thing. They're not going to be hopeful at all. There's nothing that a tank can do, nothing that an Apache helicopter can do. There's no role in this for an F-15 or an F-35. There's no purpose of a ballistic missile submarine. There's no role even the Iron Dome is going to play with 2 million to 4 million jihadists. While it seems inappropriate, I should say, for God to have called jihadists atzum, because while in vast quantities, mujahideen are blithering idiots, but thanks to Iran, to Russia, China, Turkey, even now the United States, they have advanced from sticks and stones, past bottle rockets, to missiles and drones. And while bolstered by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Egypt, Syria, and Iran, which are particularly well armed with hundreds and hundreds of billions of American weapons, as an integrated force, they will make for a formidable foe. And there is the possibility that the militaries of Saudi Arabia and that of Kuwait and Iran, Iraq, will join. Also Turkey, in particular, and Egypt, are going to join this cavalcade of mujahideen. So 2 to 4 million mujahideen and some tanks, airplanes, lots of missiles. And by that time, of course, in fact, by that time already, Iran has a nuclear bomb. Now, since Goy was actually singular, this enemy may hail predominantly from one region, race, or religion. The Nation of Islam obviously qualifies, particularly because they're savage and because they hate Jews. However, it would be hard to completely discount the participation of Communist China. The Han Chinese comprise the world's largest ethnic group of 1.4 billion individuals, 18% of the planet's population. They're on record calling for a Fakistanian state, and that means the annihilation of Israel. And having invested $60 billion in building roadways, railways, and considerable numbers of harbors from China through the Middle East, while heavily investing in Israeli infrastructure, particularly the ports of Haifa and Ashdod, they are capable of projecting a force of this magnitude. Their initiative is among the wonders of the modern world, with infrastructure so beyond the needs of the stated objectives of trade, that they're all in. And they are, of course, the most important ally of Iran. Yahweh often equates the health of his land to a vineyard and his people's presence to the blooming of a fig tree, both of which he used in this prophetic portrait. The intent of the invading force will be to set up the nation for what's going to be appalling devastation, which is to say they do not want to occupy Israel. These Muslims want to depopulate it. And while they will succeed to a point, the fig representing the presence of God's people will be splintered and bent, but not uprooted. Stripped and bared and rejected, many Jews will be scalded, but yet a remnant will survive. Thinking that how horrible it's going to be for Elia and I to have to watch this happen to Israel, pleading with Israel to return to Yahweh and to avail themselves of God's protection. Now, during this time, the land's great potential will be squandered. Farmers will be frustrated and food will become scarce. The vineyards and the olive orchards will fail and the grain harvest will wither. From barley to grapes, from figs to pomegranates, from dates to apples, it will all shrivel and die. After sharing this with us, Yoel reveals, and this will be our last statement on this program, even the sacrificial offerings which bestow a share and give drink offerings which anoint, they're going to be withheld from the family of your God. Yoel, Yashayah, Yoel, Yahweh is God, Joel 1:13. There'll be nothing. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink. There'll be calls for a Messiah, but you don't know who the Messiah is, Israel. He's dead until you call him by name. When you start calling Yahweh by name, they're not going to intervene. You're not going to have the Messiah you are pleading for. You're not going to have anything to eat. You're not going to have anything to drink. It's going to be hellacious, literally hell on earth. Can't get over it. But a director of the Red Cross somewhere in Europe made a pronouncement that says Gaza is now hell on earth. It's not there, of course. Not recognizing that the only hell that is being perpetrated in Gaza is being perpetrated by the Muslims against Muslims, and that Israel is doing its level best to feed those who are devoted to killing them, and that the Red Cross wasn't even interested in stopping the hell that was being perpetrated on the hostages, and yet they have the gall to say that now that Israel is successfully feeding Gazans and keeping Hamas at bay, that Gaza is hell on earth. Is very disgusting organization that never once tried to prevent the hellish treatment of God's people. Well, on that note, I will say thank you for listening to this edition to the Yahowah blog. I wish I had better news for you, but you're better forewarned, and knowing what the prophet said, I want you to know what's going to occur, because some of you will be motivated to make a better choice to protect yourself and, more importantly, those you love, your children, from this. And the only way to do that is to read Yada Yahowah, to become part of God's covenant family, to embrace Yahweh by name, and to stop being so belligerent towards God. Thank you for listening. I am Yada, and this has been the Yahowah blog.